Good morning, Patreon. Thanks for being here. If you're new, appreciate you joining. We're going to start a little series today on radiation safety. You may have come over here, found out about me because of the medical stuff, because of the TECC training classes, or because of the gun stuff, some of the training there that we do. But I've got a pretty good background in radiation safety, radiation protection, NBC as it used to be called, or now CBRN, preparedness. And one of the things I like to do is share radiation safety tips, things that you can actually put into place and put into practice with civilians. Because just like with anything else, with a car crash or with an injury or any crisis situation, it's almost always civilians that are the first responders. So I want to talk about the 3 principles of radiation protection. And broadly speaking, they're time, distance, and shielding. And we'll get into that a bit more. Today, I want to talk about time, okay? And so when we're teaching people our radiation protection courses and just coaching people on what they can really do, because there's a lot of fluff on the internet about what people should or shouldn't do, and there's a lot of military or agency level publications that talk in really broad scope. And the problem with broad scope is it's really easy for a person trying to put some sort of specific information to practice to lose focus. So time, distance, and shielding, these are the 3 principles that you're going to get out of this series. In summary, you want to spend as little time in a radiation zone as possible. And so the way that radiation exposure works is it's cumulative. And typically when we talk about radiation exposure like that, we're talking about gamma rays and X-rays. So that's electromagnetic energy that is, it ionizes the cells of the body or anything that's living and damages the tissue. That is what tends to cause things like cancer and leukemia over time, and can cause burns and stuff like that. It's honestly low risk to most civilians. Like, none of this radiation stuff is something you're going to have to action very many times. So this is information, in case the one time in your life it becomes relevant. If you're already a nuclear energy worker or atomic energy worker, depending on your jurisdiction, well, A, you already know this stuff, and B, it's part of your lifestyle. I've spent 20 years packing radioactive isotopes around British Columbia primarily, but more specifically Canada and some places overseas. I'm pretty well acquainted with it. So what we do is we reduce total exposure, because dose that we pick up, the energy that goes through us and affects our body, is cumulative. The more exposure we pick up, the more damage. It's a really simple 1-to-1 ratio. And so the less time we can spend in a field of a given radiation intensity, the less radiation is going to pass through us. In practice, what that means is if you are walking in a direction and the radiation intensity is going up, then you either have to go fast through, if you have no other choice, or turn around and go the other way so that you reduce the overall time you spend there. That's what you're going to do. That's how you're going to reduce the time. It's quite common. And in fact, on one of my industrial exams from close to 20 years ago, one of the questions is, you're setting up a radioisotope to do an exposure at a busy intersection, and there's people walking by and there are vehicles driving by at 40 kilometers an hour. Calculate how much dose the person walking through the zone and the vehicle driving through the zone at 40 kilometers an hour are going to take. And if we do the relationship, what we learn is that the less time you spend there, the less dose there is. It doesn't even matter if it's a really high intensity. You can sort of bypass the fact that it's really high intensity radiation by spending less time there. When we're doing radiation source retrievals and working in radiation emergency areas, one of the tenets, and if you've looked up Chernobyl or Fukushima or any of the other sort of nuclear reactor meltdown crisis scenarios that have that are in recent memory, they would form lines, and everyone would go in for 10 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever that number was, and no more. And That was so that they can control the dose. Well, if we find ourselves in a radiation zone, we can do the same thing. We control the amount of time we spend in that zone or at that intensity. If we can get through a high intensity area and get to a low intensity area relatively quickly, it might not be all that dangerous to go through the high intensity area. Okay, so it's not immediately going to hurt you. It's a cumulative dose. And that's why time is such a critical factor. In fact, I call it number one: time, distance, and shielding. So first thing I want to do is reduce my time. Okay, next video when we come back, we're gonna talk about creating distance. I look forward to seeing you there. Remember to get outside, okay? Keep active, because none of the physical things that you want to do in the world are possible if you're not fit, and keep getting after it.